Joy, thriller last night in Death Valley. LSU in overtime, never leads in the game, shocks the world, as some people had told me today, even though your boy picked them to win. Of course I did. But LSU beats Ole Miss in overtime. Your thoughts on the game?
Absolutely got to give LSU credit for the way that they finished. They had, in all seriousness, they had no reason to win that football game. They did not play clean. They had a number of bad turnovers, gave up a couple of big plays to Ole Miss that any outside onlooker, if you didn't tell them what the final score was and they stopped watching at the end of the third quarter, they would have all said that Ole Miss won the football game. But LSU took advantage of every opportunity that they had. Look, my biggest takeaway here, though, I can't not focus on Ole Miss. I can't not focus on Lane Kiffin. What we spoke about the other day when they lost to Kentucky, it is extremely problematic that there was this high expectation with everything that they did this offseason, with how much better they were supposed to get from last year and the way that they finished last year, that they were supposed to be a legit SEC contender and a playoff contender. They're out of the playoff mix. I don't think that they have enough on their resume on the bone to go 9-3 and to finish this year strong enough unless they beat Georgia to get into the playoff convo. I think, and this will probably piss some folks off, he's going to Florida. There's no way. I know
on me so much during the offseason when I said that you can't come in here and when I was saying this all offseason. Hold on, you can't do that to me. You cannot do that to me.
Yes, I can.
You got to come in here and say, Blake, you might have been right. He might be going to Florida.
Okay, you might have been right, but things have changed. You said that in the offseason, and there wasn't not enough had happened. Hold on. If Ole Miss had gone to the SEC championship game, which was my argument, is that if Ole Miss had done well, he might not leave.
And if my aunt had a penis, she would be my uncle. But reality is not that way.
It has come to the point, though, where I'm all in on that being the future because he couldn't get it done at Ole Miss. It's got to be going through his head now that the minute they pick up the phone and call him, and if Florida's going to be interested, that's the best available option on the market that's going to be willing to leave their current school. They're going to say, well, you couldn't get it done at Ole Miss because they had enough resources, but not enough for you to win a national championship. Come not really come home, but come to Florida and you can win one. But yeah, I mean, we have to admonish Lane Kiffin for not finishing that football game.
Well, Joe, I think that there's something in play here that I want to bring up. LSU allowed 6 points in the second half. 6. I think it's very disingenuous, not for you, but I've seen some, to constantly blame Lane when that defense stepped up for LSU. Look, you had Harold Perkins out. You're coming off a bye. Whit Weeks has 18 tackles. He has a sack. Joe, by the way, just throwing this out there, never in the history of a Lane Kiffin offense in the SEC has a team had more sacks than 5. Alabama did it last year at 5. LSU had 6. Braden Swinson, 2 sacks. You had a safety in Major Burns who had a sack and a half. The God's honest truth is after that second quarter, LSU stood up and they literally stopped them on everything that they did. Now, do I think Lane had some bad play calls in there? Yes. But I think the storyline of this game, okay, is that LSU's started figuring things out on defense. I don't know how that you can walk away from that game with the amount of tackles for loss that they had, with all the sacks that they had. Look, do they have some leaky stuff in the secondary? Yeah, I will continue to admit that all the live long day. But the God's honest truth is that front seven under Blake Baker and Bo Davis and Kevin Peoples stepped up, and they made this game what it was. Joe, here's the truth. LSU has 9 points this year off of 9 turnovers. Now, they had 3 turnovers yesterday. You'll go in the box score and say, well, they only had 2. No, LSU forced a turnover on downs. The reason they call it a turnover on downs is it's technically a turnover. Why they don't list that as a turnover, I have no idea. They made a crucial stop in the red zone. But every time that LSU made a boneheaded decision on offense, it was Blake Baker on that defense that stepped up. It's not like Trey Harris wasn't getting the football. It's not like they didn't try to go to Juice Wells. The truth is one team made the plays and the others didn't. And we went into this season saying that, look, oh, man, they got Princely Human Yellen. They got Walter Nolan. They got all these guys. Joe, they didn't give up a sack. So the God's honest truth was I know what they did in the portal. I still think that they have a lot of talent. But offensively, the last 3 weeks in the SEC, Ole Miss has been not good. Now, they also, you can make the argument that they face 3 elite pass rushes in the SEC.
Yeah,
LSU
wait, if
now,
you're supposed to be,
hold on. LSU is now in the top 8 in sacks in the season. Joe, they have more sacks now. They're going to be tripled than what they had a year before. So again, I look at that offensive line for Ole Miss, and I look at the pass rush for LSU, that being the game. Their O-line is really bad, meaning Ole Miss's is.
I'm 1,000% willing to give credit to LSU and their defense getting better and them playing as good as they did, bending but not breaking in situations where they were in scoring spots. But I'm sorry that I can't help but be super hyper focused on because here's one thing that's very true. It's LSU. It's Brian Kelly. The expectation is supposed to be coming into the season, and one of the conversations we had this offseason was that LSU should be a top 10 team. I thought that they were going to beat USC, and I thought that they were going to go on a tremendous run before they showed up to play against Ole Miss. And then if they beat Ole Miss, their next big challenge ending up being against Alabama, and that would kind of be the real indicator of how good they were. We expected that from them. Ole Miss is never consistently good. And Lane Kiffin does all this.
True. They're third in the SEC in wins in the last 4 years. You can't say that they're not good.
Okay, before that, they've never won it.
But you can't.
The history of them as a program is
okay. You can't say over the last 100 years they've been shitty.
You're hanging on to the wrong thing that I'm trying to bring up here. All I'm just trying to say here is that Lane has built this team up. And all the shit that he talks, the trolling that he does in these press conferences, his personality, and the way that they were finally set up to have the expectation of being in the same conversation of an LSU, and they can't get the job done. They lose to Kentucky, and they drop this game to LSU. And the biggest problem of all of this is what you just brought up a second ago. You're supposed to be an elite offense. You're supposed to be one of the best offensive minds in the country. It shouldn't matter if you're going up against good defenses. You should still find ways to finish and score, and you can't do it. That's the indictment on Lane Kiffin there.
I think it's too easy of an argument to come out here and say that they haven't faced 3 premier pass rushes. When you look at South Carolina and what they did to Bama and we'll talk about that in a moment. We know what Kentucky has on their defensive line, and LSU is top 8 in the country in sacks, Joe. I mean, like, you can't – I think it's very easy to come out here and say that. I understand what you're trying to say, but their O-line's bad, and they've been going up against I don't want to say they're bad. I think they're average. And they've gone up against –
they're bad. They're getting their asses – they've gotten their ass kicked the last 3 weeks.
But I could make the argument, look at the D-lines and the front sevens that they've played. You can't – I get what you're trying to say. We as the media put expectations on teams. Look – Garrett Nussmeier was not good last night. Now, did he make crucial throws and crucial moments and crucial situations? Hell yes. Some of the windows that he was putting them in, you cannot take that away from him. Critical throws that he made. The one in overtime, absolutely amazing. But, Joe, every single time that they needed to stop, they got it. I mean, Joe, if I would have told you coming into this game that in one of the halves that Lane Kiffin would be held to 6 points, what would you have said? You would have said, what quarter did Jackson Dart get hurt in? Okay, let's not act.
I probably would have said, what dumb shit was Lane Kiffin doing?
Okay, well, fair. But there's a bigger issue in this. You have a total defense that was in the 110s last year. Now they're all the way up in the top 40s. There comes a part where we got to say LSU made adjustments coaching-wise, and it's paying off. Joe, they had the highest paid defensive coordinator in the country. They have both of the highest paid defensive line coaches in the country. Well, they're top 8 in sacks. That's why it's paying off. Now, I've said this on my other show in covering the team. I said it all week. Joe, this defense is better than anybody giving them credit for. I said on Thursday my keys to victory of why they would win. One, being at that place in Death Valley, which people continue to underestimate every single moment that they love to. You don't come in there and night win. But it was going to be the defense that propelled them to a win, and it did. Now, offensively, LSU has massive issues. They can't run the football. They are down a couple of receivers, and Nussmeier makes bad decisions, and there's bad play calling. But every single time the bell was being rung, LSU answered it. And I got to admit something, Joe. In primetime games at home, Brian Kelly is undefeated at LSU. He's 13-0. So everybody wants to come out here. We just had a segment about Dan Lanning and Ryan Day, right? Well, Brian Kelly's 13-0 in those situations at LSU. So everybody wants to paint Brian Kelly on one light, but not want to paint out Ryan Day in the other.
Wait, what was that stat for Brian Kelly?
He's 13-0 at night games at LSU. You can look it up.
LSU. At LSU. Okay, I'm done.
Yeah, 13-0 at night at LSU. In prime, okay. Joe, you're talking about Alabama. You're talking about a top 10 on this. For a guy that can't win a big game, they continue to find ways to win them in primetime situations at home.
BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts. Well, the at-home part's the nice little added caveat because
so
if they still lost to USC. They still lost to USC, and USC
what?
stinks. They should have lost to USC. I mean, that has to get brought up.
Sure, but there also has to come a point where this dude is going on 8 years, about to be 9 of 10-win seasons plus.
But this, I didn't mean to make this about Brian Kelly, but that's Brian Kelly, man. Is that he does the things he's supposed to, but
your inability to give LSU any credit because
it's Brian Kelly. I will not give Brian Kelly. I gave him credit. Great win over Ole Miss. But again, losing to USC is a little bit of a scourge on the season, is it not?
You lost to NIU. Your favorite team lost to NIU.
We're not talking about Notre Dame. We're not talking about Notre Dame. We're talking about Brian Kelly. We're talking about
Brian
LSU.
Kelly comes from.
It's not coming anywhere from that.
Okay, well then I want the same exact thing that you're doing to Ryan Day and Dan Lanning and all this. I want that same exact energy for Brian Kelly. It's not who was coaching. It's a place of where he's at. I said it.
He still has to win.
He just
did a playoff game. Look. I am not. Here's where I'm getting a little bothered by this. Great win. I said it was a great win. Great defensive performance. But it feels a little bit like you're crowning Brian Kelly for some weird consolation prize.
Joe, you literally came in here and most of the national media picked Ole Miss to win this football game.
Yeah.
Okay. The same thing happened with Oregon and Ohio State, did it not? Yeah. One guy gets crowned where the other doesn't.
Because one is in his third year ever as a head coach.
It doesn't matter when you look at it week to week, Joe.
We know, but this is why I came in opening and saying that my attention is on Lane Kiffin because we know what Brian Kelly is. Like, we know that Brian Kelly can win these football games. Lane Kiffin can't. This was supposed to be a year that he could, and he still can't. That, to me, is a bigger story than Brian Kelly doing what we knew that he was supposed to do, which is win a football game at home in one of the hardest, or shall I say the hardest home environment in the country. I'm giving LSU credit, though. I'm giving them credit.
You talked about Ole Miss. Where do you see LSU going from here?
I agree with what you said offensively. They have to be a lot cleaner. And as I mentioned earlier, their schedule is workable enough for them to play really consistently through the following weeks and to work through some of those issues. And I know they got Arkansas this week. They can't take them too lightly. They got to be ready against Texas A&M on the road because we know that is a very difficult place to play, and getting Alabama at home is a huge advantage. But to your point, there can't be that many misfires against better football teams that know how to finish. You know, you can't be throwing those picks. You can't be going 22 of 51. That's a ton of passing attempts. You got to run the football better.
Well, they're getting away from it.
Right.
Okay. I mean, right. Again, the teams, like, you got to, if you're getting 3 yards in a cloud of dust, get 3 yards in a cloud of dust. You can't just abandon it. Now, again, here's what I'm going to tell you. LSU's not winning out. Okay. They're not going to win out. They're going to lose another football game. To who, I don't know. But Garrett's inability to make crucial decisions at moments will come back to bite them in the ass. If they don't lose for whatever reason, it's going to be because that defense consistently gets better. Now, Joe, I'm going to throw this at you. Boy, they looked a little bit better without Perkins in this situation. And I think that comes to a part where Harold Perkins being out, they were able to play the defense that they needed to play, and they're not trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. So, look, here's what I think ultimately is going to happen. I think defensively, Joe, you're at the end of the season, we're going to look up here and be like, dude, they went from 115 to the top 40s and be like, what happened? They don't have the dudes that they need to have yet. Now, that's a whole couple recruiting classes away, but they got a tough stretch, so we'll see how they continue to perform here. All right, we got to get moving here.